Just like to welcome everybody to this special edition of GCMA Know-How, part of our webinar series. We're doing this in collaboration with our good friend Leighton Walker. So this is also a GCMA Insights podcast. So a little bit of an innovation coming to you through yourselves. But we sort of looked at it and we thought the information is going to be similar going out to everybody. So we'd take advantage and hopefully kill two birds with one stone. So absolutely delighted as well today to be joined by Karen Moss and Kevin from BRS Golf. Thank you very much for joining us today. And delighted to be part of this, and hopefully I'll be able to chip in with some questions a bit later on. But for now, that's enough for me, and I'll hand it over to the expert. Over to you, Leighton.
Oh God. Okay, thank you very much, Gavin. Thank you for that introduction, and welcome, Karen and Kevin. Good to see you again. So just for anyone perhaps tuning in for the first time, or whether that be the webinar or the podcast, we've been doing these episodes now on participation data for probably about 10, 12 months. And it's proving really valuable and really useful. We're getting some great information out of these episodes, but also what it's really doing is seeing how we're tracking post-COVID, which was such an anomaly in the scheme of things. So, you know, we're all very keen to see where the data is tracking and utilization numbers, etc. So we're going to continue to do that today. We're doing this quarterly. So here we're looking at the April to June quarter, so quarter 2, 2022. And we'll be sort of looking back versus some previous years, but also just general trends in where things are going at the moment. We've just been discussing the Open and Rory's lack of victory last week. Perhaps you've got a slightly smug Aussie here with the Cam Smith victory, but equally, if he wasn't up there, I think I would love to have seen Rory win that. So we've lamented that. We're moving on, and we're going to get into some data stuff now. So Kevin, I'll throw over to you first. If you want to just talk us through quarter 2 participation. Just for the listeners or viewers out there, the viewers will see a screen share of a presentation that the guys from BRS have produced for this. In terms of the podcast, what we're going to do is make a report or notes available, and they'll be available in the show notes. So if you're listening to the podcast, hopefully you'll pick up enough from it, but equally you can refer back to those notes or that report to make it a little bit more digestible. So Kevin, off you go. How are we doing in quarter 2?
Well, thanks, Leighton. So Q2 this year has been another pretty successful quarter for golf. We have seen 7 million member rounds played across kind of our network of 1,300 golf clubs that use a BRS technology. The green line, for those who can see, the green line is 2022's numbers. So traditionally what we would have seen as the golf season, January, February, March, where the line is a little bit lower. As we move into Q2, kind of spring moving into summer, the only difference between the green line and the rest of the lines is that it's much higher up the graph. So it is, we've had than pre-pandemic levels kind of. England has had the lion's share, I suppose, of the rounds, with 3.5 million member rounds played in Q2. It was actually 1 million down on the same period last year. But if we think back, that was when we kind of came out of lockdown. So you had that initial spike. But looking back to pre-pandemic, the 3.5 million member rounds in Q2 this year was actually 1.6 million more than 2019. So yeah, pretty strong performance in England. Ireland had 1.5 million member rounds, which was flat year over year, but 0.6 million up on 2019. Scotland, next biggest market, had 1.2 million member rounds, which was 0.3 million down year over year, but 0.3 million up on 2019. And I suppose Scotland last year had kept golf open, so they're kind of the anomaly, I suppose, in terms of actually looking year over year. Northern Ireland had 500,000 member rounds, which was just shy of 0.2 million member rounds down, but 0.3 million member rounds up. And then Wales is kind of the smaller markets. They had 0.3 million member rounds, and that was 0.2 down year over year, but 0.2 up on 2019. So pretty much where we are is what we've seen across kind of the last few podcasts and webinars that we've done in terms of golf is still in a pretty healthy position. So it is.
Yep. And I mean, just looking at the numbers sort of versus the last couple of years, you can definitely see a decline there. So, you know, from a peak of 3.5 million in June back in 20, and near 3 million in 21. It's now that figure's down nearer 2.5 million. So would you say there's certainly a definite downward trend there, but still, like you say, in a very healthy position when you look at it versus previous years, Kevin?
Yeah, definitely. We have. You still see that screen? I was messing about here with stuff.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah.
We're still in a very strong position this year compared to where we were. If you were to look at just kind of basing it on Q1 this year, we've seen 5.2 million member rounds which were played in the UK, and so with 7 million being played this quarter, it's a 35% increase. Kind of what you would expect to see as we move kind of into our main golfing season. Comparing that with 2019 levels, that percentage increase is fairly similar to what we would have seen. However, the actual number of rounds are so much higher that to be able to maintain the percentage increase is pretty strong. So yeah, things are looking pretty positive.
Mm.
Yeah, so Kevin, I'm just having a look at that graph and maybe sort of trying to interpret it a little bit as well. It definitely seems as though there's that the trend is, you know, golf is sort of stabilizing now. It seems to sort of gone through that sort of period of flux through the pandemic, but it seems to because the lines on the graph follow very similar lines to previous years. But if you take 27 to 2019, we're pretty much at double the number of member rounds of that period. So that's a 100% increase where we are today as to where we were, you know, 3 to 5 years ago. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. So it is. If you were to take, you know, the total rounds over the year, you know, we done 22 last year versus 11, 12 in kind of pre-pandemic levels. So yeah, we're double, you know, so we haven't doubled our member numbers. You know, our member numbers are up kind of 27%, something like that. So we've got more members, but the members are playing kind of more golf as well at the same time. So yeah.
Mm. And so just talk us through those shifts year on year, Kevin, in terms of what we've seen, and probably particularly since the start of COVID.
Yeah, so actually, interestingly, this year, if you kind of exclude the May, June of 2020, that was where kind of the initial spike happened. May to June, historically, if you kind of track all the lines, that they either flatten or they drop off. June has been one of them and we've seen it with both member and visitor golf. Historically, there would have been a small decrease in June. But this year we've managed to, June has outperformed May. So that's kind of a year over year. And then even looking further back, that's been a bit of a shift where June golf has again picked up this year. And we're seeing in terms of days of play, we're probably falling back to pre-pandemic levels. So more member golf is more weekend focused as such, whereas during kind of the 2 years there of COVID, you know, with people on furlough and, you know, and whatever different working from home more, it was easier to get out Monday to Friday, but we're starting to see the shift fall back into that kind of weekends weekend block booking area. So it is still seeing, weekday performance is still good, but we do see weekend golf has definitely fallen back to where it was kind of pre-COVID.
And the trend certainly seems to have steadied out, doesn't it? I think you sort of touched on this earlier, that I guess we're not seeing those peaks and troughs as we open and close and that type of thing. But looking at sort of March through June, it's quite a steady line on the graph, isn't it?
Yeah. We're just seeing that from historically what we would have seen, that just steady growth. There's no, post-lockdown spike, and hopefully, touch wood, we don't get any more lockdowns or anything. So yeah, we're not seeing that. Were we seeing pent-up demand because people couldn't get out? People are freely able to get out, and they're able to, that they are able to get out, they are actually getting out playing golf now. So yeah, we're seeing that steady growth in golf as opposed to the spikes and troughs that we would have seen over this last couple of years as golf kind of opened and closed.
Yeah. And what about from a regional point of view, Kevin? There tends to always be slightly different trends, but is there anything that's sort of emerging there in terms of differences from country to country or region to region?
Yeah. So kind of rather than bucketing all golf in the UK and Ireland, and it just becomes a very high level number. It's split it out into kind of, England's been split into three. So you have the North, Midlands and the South. And then each country has its own kind of unique performance there. So this table, I've kind of used 2019 as our baseline of where golf was before the mayhem ensued over this last 2 years. So North England and the Midlands, the 2022 numbers are kind of 75% up year over year, or over on 2019 in terms of rounds played. The South of England has seen a stronger performance again, with rounds in excess of 100% up on 2019. Ireland and Northern Ireland, something similar to the North and Midlands of England, have seen strong double-digit growth with kind of 70-71% based on 2019. Wales, again, all just shy of 153% up on 2019. Much smaller numbers than we're seeing in kind of the bigger markets, but still a good strong performance by Wales. And Scotland has been the one that has been 30 or 39% up on 2019 numbers. If all the other numbers weren't so high, you would think Scotland's performing brilliant. But it's the one that's probably just slightly lagging behind the others. But still, when you're talking 39% growth based on previous years, I think that's more than acceptable.
I'd be interested in a few theories on that, and they probably are just that at this stage. But there's some interesting numbers there, isn't there? I mean, obviously Scotland courses stayed open, didn't they? All through the well, not all through the lockdowns, but they tended to stay open a bit more than courses in England, Wales, and Ireland. So perhaps that had that sort of steadying or moderating effect that we didn't see some of those big peaks and troughs. Any thoughts on that one with Scotland?
That was kind of what my initial thought on it was, is that because they kept it open in Q1 2020, so there hasn't been the massive peaks and troughs. People have people have golfed themselves out, maybe. There's not that fatigue really, so people have just kind of steadily just played along. So it is that was my initial theory on it. I haven't got right down into the nitty gritty of the numbers to try and decipher what exactly is going on. But as I say, 39% growth in any walk of life would be acceptable.
Yeah. And does anyone want to throw some guesses at why Wales has increased by 153%? That's massive, isn't it?
No, I wouldn't dare enter into that debate. I think fantastic performance from Wales, actually, that they're for some reason it's they've just massively increased the amount of rounds in golf clubs. So I think big round of applause.
And even differences with the south and the north of England, very interesting. Sort of 25% difference between the south and the north and Midlands is interesting. So how we can ever obtain some information on that, I'm not sure, but it'd be really interesting to try and dig into perhaps why that's happened.
Yeah, it might be the case that there's specific golf clubs have just, suddenly just become member play, or, taken on, we're already busy and taking on more members. Yeah. So, I'll do some digging, and I'll definitely find out why. Why.
Sorry, Kevin, I don't mean to set you some homework there.
It'll keep me out of mischief.
Yeah. And, well, that probably relates a little bit to what we're talking about here. Membership numbers, what sort of trends are we seeing with membership numbers, and then perhaps the impact that's having on some of these numbers we're seeing?
So membership numbers, we'd probably say we've seen a slight decline from where we were in the end of 2021. And that's probably more to do with a little bit of housekeeping on our side, where we kind of... We got rid of some old and defunct systems where they were just kind of still counting towards member numbers, but there was no bookings or anything going through them. They were just old systems. So kind of once we completed that little bit of housekeeping, our membership numbers are sitting around the 675,000 mark now. So and I kind of tracked them over the last 2 months, and they fluctuate 1,000 up, 1,000 down. There's nothing really that looks like, we've kind of flattened out a little bit in terms of member numbers. And we're probably now in a point of retaining members as opposed to acquiring new members. So it's, over this last couple of months, there's been no massive peaks or troughs or no major changes. Once we kind of stabilized our own numbers, the membership number has kind of remained quite flat, which is probably a positive thing.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I know, even relating things to my own club, yes, it's very much going to become about retention now. We're not going to see growth in members. I think a lot of places are at capacity, so it's going to be about keeping those members, and that is the challenge. And in terms of demographics, we often discuss this when we're looking at this, just to try and gauge how or who's playing a bit more or less, and if there's been any shift in that demographic.
Are both in terms of age and male, female, not a massive amount of change. Maybe in terms of the female participation, we've probably seen a slight decrease of maybe 2 percentage points based on where we were at 2021. We're kind of at about 2018, 2019 levels in terms of percentage wise. But again, we've got now on 30% more members. So, to be at the same level of percentage wise, but of a much bigger number. So yeah, our female numbers are probably they're at a high level as they were kind of, as we've seen over this last couple of years, they've increased. And I think it makes up just, 27.4% of our audience is females, so you're talking a quarter of 675,000 versus we were at about 27% in 2018, but we're at less than 500,000. So, our female participation numbers, even though percentage-wise they've dropped, they're still pretty strong. And then in terms of age demographic, the 18 to 34, we've seen a small percentage, a 1% decrease in the 18 to 34, but the 35 to 44 age range has seen a 3% increase. So whether there's some 34-year-olds suddenly became 35-year-olds since we last spoke at the end and just moved into a new demographic, it is kind of so. But across them two kind of age ranges, they're still performing pretty well. Most of the other age ranges are pretty flat in terms of what we've seen in the tail end of 2021 and in the Q1 this year. So yeah, it goes hand in hand with our kind of membership numbers not changing massively, and the demographics haven't really. They shifted over COVID and they haven't shifted back. We're still seeing what we over the last 2 years in terms of the age range changed to slightly younger, and then we saw an increase in female golfers. So yeah, it's been that's been pretty positive as well.
Yeah, a couple of things on that. I think probably some people thought that perhaps that 18 to 34 age bracket might be most affected as we come out of COVID. Were they participating in golf because they couldn't other sports? And a lot of that's quite anecdotal, I guess, and it made sense. But maybe the numbers aren't bearing that out as such.
Yeah, I think that was probably one of them. It was an expectation, really, is that once other stuff opened again, people would just disappear. But golf and golf clubs and golf club managers have done a pretty good job in terms of engaging new members, and it's all about how you can embed a new member into your golf club so that they don't always feel like a new member years down the line. So they do. So I think golf clubs have done a pretty good job in terms of making new members stick around. Yeah.
And then the other thing that I noticed there is the female participation. It does seem much higher than national averages we're used to seeing. And Gavin, you might have a bit more information on this, but I think typically we operate sort of around the 15 to 17% mark in terms of female membership participation. So just interesting to see those numbers up around the 27% mark and in that region. Does that mean that they're actually playing more, or have we seen an increase in the number of females that are members of golf clubs?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of traditionally that's been the number that's sort of been bandied around, isn't it? Late in the there's about 14 or 15% of the golf played in the UK is female. And I think it's something that we noticed on the Q1 report as well. So that was really why I just would have liked a little bit of maybe clarification on this one, Kevin. Is this membership or is it member rounds that this data is based on?
In terms of this particular slide here?
Yeah.
This is membership.
This is membership, okay.
Yeah.
So we're roughly 28% of members of golf clubs are female. So so I think that's a much higher number than traditionally we've looked at. So that's brilliant. And I think that the demographic change as well, it's very clear that there has been a shift over the last 5 years towards a slightly different demographic playing golf. And I think we certainly tried to emphasize throughout the pandemic and throughout this boost that golf got was retention was going to be the key focus for us going forward. It was we did get a little bit of a gift through the crisis, and to take advantage of that. And I think that's that 2022 graph sort of bores out that golf clubs were quite successful in retaining those new members. So I think there's again it's a very, very positive message going out to clubs and their managers.
Yeah, definitely. And just backtracking one or two slides, Kevin, rounds per member, something we didn't touch on. It's always an interesting one because you can have more members, but if they're playing less, you're not going to be as busy. And we often hear the cry from our members that we've got too many, or that so and we'll come on to a couple of other slides in a minute from Karen as well that might give us some interesting information as well.
Yeah. So the average rounds per member this year to the end of June, it averages out at about 18, just shy of 18 rounds per member. Looking back at 2020 and 2021, I think we've seen 35 and 33 was the full year average. So
wow.
18 at the half year point, we're probably tracking, probably on par with where we were. Probably going to beat 2021 and fall somewhere between there and 2022, the 34, once it averages out over the year. But yeah, we've seen, people are still playing, quite often. So they are, when you look back at pre-pandemic levels, we were the low 20s. It's kind of your average number of member rounds played. So to be not far off that at the half year mark, it's pretty positive in terms of, so we've got more members and more members are playing more often. There's no, demand for tee sheets and, compromising the first tee with squeezing tee times and putting extra groups out. Everybody's able to get, what they see themselves as an adequate amount of golf, for their own membership.
Yeah. And the other side of that is it's got to be healthy for clubs in terms of on spend to bar and catering and pro shops and driving ranges and that type of thing as well. So that's good to hear. Really good.
Yeah.
And Karen, I just alluded to a couple of slides you'd thrown in there, just which look very interesting. And there's a little bit of perception versus reality stuff here. So I want you to talk us through those, because quite often in golf clubs you're a bit guilty of that. Perception is thrown around very easily, but reality is quite often different. So let us have it.
Slide 9 there. Seeing as we've just been talking about member rounds and perception versus reality, and we're going to get a little bit philosophical, talk about how we perceive things to be and what they really are. So in May, just about halfway through the Q2, we surveyed our members to ask them about their playing habits. And one of the questions we asked them was how often they felt they played golf. So it's interesting to see the reality of the data. As Kev was saying there, on average, members playing around 18 rounds per person so far this year, versus how much people think they're playing. So 66% of them said they were playing more than once a week. Which it just isn't borne out by what we were seeing in the data trends. So it could just be wishful thinking. I mean, we'd all love to be playing more golf, I'm sure. So, but I think there's an important point here for club managers, and that is that we do all have our own perceptions of performance. And, we have a feel for things like, are we seeing more people playing golf, what the utilization numbers are like on the course and that kind of thing. And we have that in our mind's eye. But I think that this shows it's really worthwhile looking at the data, as it may tell a completely different story to what we have in our own minds. And, this is the reason why we do this, is so that clubs can make the data-driven decisions that we feel are so important, that they are basing their pricing strategy and their membership acquisition strategy, for example, on the reality of what the data is telling us. So, we do provide a wealth of different reports for our customers, and we'd be very happy for people to get in touch with us after this if they want to look into the performance of their own club. And Leighton, I know we talked a bit about this last time around when we were chatting about pricing strategies and green fee revenue and everything. So, we can provide all of that information so that the clubs can make those decisions. And with the changes in the golf landscape over the last couple of years, I think that is definitely more important than ever.
Yep. And just for the listeners out there, one of the answer choices there was every day. And apparently 1.02% of the golfing population play every day. So they must be very, very good golfers at the end of all of that, I got to say. Either that or it feels like they play every day.
Well, we had about 14,000 people take part in this survey. So it was quite a sizable chunk to base that on. So I don't know if you can see, you'd have to squint maybe at it, Leighton, but that 1% or so that play every day equates to about 142 people who say that they play every day. So lucky damn them.
Fair play to them.
But I would say that the 22% or so, the just over 3,000 people there who say they play once a week are probably, that would probably be closer to what we would see as being the average than the 66% who think that they play more than once a week. I think that, might be wishful thinking.
Yeah, definitely. And so just to sort of, I guess, bring this to a bit of a summary, things are steadied out, I guess we'd say. That's certainly one thing. Numbers are still very healthy, although not as healthy as they were in the last couple of years, but that's probably absolutely to be expected. Member retention is going to be key, I guess. Membership numbers are still very strong, but they probably can't grow too much more from where they are here. So it's going to be maintaining.
Leighton, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to say on retention, Kev, if you want to go to slide 7, I just had one other piece of data from the survey that I wanted to share.
This is very important. Yeah.
I mean, we were really interested to find out about this, because I think we've all now fully realised the impact of the cost of living crisis, and it's not just about inflation and fuel prices rising and, you know, wages not increasing in line with the cost of goods and fuel and everything else, you know. So we know that there's a big impact coming, and perhaps we still haven't fully felt it. You know, I think this winter could be pretty intense for a lot of households. So we were keen to find out, you know, do people still think that, you know, in light of that cost of living pressure on household incomes, you know, and the fact that so many new members have joined over the last 2 years, so this is a new expense for their household as well, you know. And, you know, when you think about that in terms of other expenses that they might have. So we thought this was a pertinent question to ask. You know, do people still think that their golf club membership is a necessity? And we found that, yes, the majority of them do think that it is still a necessity. But we did have about a third of them say now that they consider it to be a luxury item. So it's definitely something golf clubs will want to keep an eye on as we head towards autumn and winter, and, you know, the cost of living starts to impact even more. So, you know, we definitely encourage clubs making use of custom payment schemes and things like that. And, you know, to do my sales pitch, of course, you know, BRS does offer a membership management system, which is extremely robust, and you can set all kinds of different payment cycles and design your own versions and give members a way to spread the cost of their membership and that sort of thing. But, you know, it is definitely an important point to keep an eye on the members who are playing throughout the year, who is and isn't fully utilising their membership. It's the best indication you're going to get probably of which members are a possible risk of leaving.
Yeah. Great tool. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe just trying to offer them something different then, a flexible way to pay or whatever it might be. But I think that this is definitely something clubs will want to keep an eye on as we head in towards the off season.
Yeah, definitely. It almost feels like there's another episode in this, and I think this is going to become more and more valid over the next 6 months or so. Something I know we're talking about at board level quite a lot is how this is going to affect things going forward. And, you know, one more reason that we really need to keep our eye on the ball with, you know, membership retention and making sure that we're providing the right environment, flexibility around payment, etc., like you've said, Karen. So no, really, really interesting. Yeah. Really interesting stuff, that. Right. So before
just to come in on that, I thought that's a really sort of fascinating stat as well. Obviously, you know, we know that golf club membership isn't recession proof, and it's very possible we're heading that way over the winter period. So I think that's a really good stat to have. I mean, again, we're sort of trying to promote sort of the well-being and health benefits of golf as well, to try and make people to understand that it is more of a necessity, and it's not just a game. It's actually to do with their own personal well-being, and maybe, you know, as part of those schemes, Karen, you know, give people a way back into golf clubs. You know, if you feel that, you know, you're you know, that the cost of living crisis has affected you so much that you have to give up your membership, then okay. But listen, in a year's time, 2 years' time, we won't charge you the joining fee if you've just paid it within the last year or two, and come back into the club whenever you feel that you know, you're ready for that. So
yeah, that's a really nice idea. And, you know, I think it is important, Gavin, that people still have, you know, a social life during this. You know, it's going to be a long, tough winter potentially for everybody. And as you said, there are mental health benefits to playing golf. We know that people who play golf live longer, for example, and it's not just about the physical exercise that you get, it's about the society that you become a part of and forging those relationships that, you know, it's a game you can play well into your 70s and 80s. You know, and having those social bonds is another big reason why people love the game, and it is a reason why it is of such benefit, not just physically but mentally too. And I think we're all going to need ways to bolster our mental health and mental well-being and physical well-being over the coming months. So yeah, I think that's it's an important point.
Yeah. And just to put some clarity on that for the listeners. So the question here was, with the cost of living increasing, do you view playing golf as a luxury or a necessity? And looking at the answers, we've got 35% of people saying they feel it's a luxury. 52% saying it's a necessity, and then nearly 13% saying not sure. So perhaps we can put that 35% of luxury answers into the slightly vulnerable category, and perhaps they're the ones that we should be targeting.
Yep. Sorry, Leighton, I was forgetting that we need to make this audio proof as well.
It's okay.
Not describing the slide properly at all there. Thank you very much.
Well, like I said, we can always point people to the report afterwards, and highly recommend people reading this in conjunction with listening.
Yeah, we will have that report available on the website to download as a PDF. But as you said there, Leighton, you'll include it in the link within the information about the episode of the podcast.
Correct.
And we'll also be, we'll post out some information on social media about how to download that. So if people follow us on social, they can keep an eye out for that next week.
Absolutely. Anything else anyone would like to add before we wrap things up? Gavin, anything happening at the GCMA we need to know about currently?
No, I guess, we're sort of, we're in a sort of support phase at the moment at the GCMA. The members are very, very busy at their clubs with a lot of golf being played, lots of competitions, some postponed competitions over the last few years are sort of, they're all kicking off now. So the members are very, very busy, and I guess we're just there to support. We've got a webinar coming up next week on strategic planning, business planning. And of course our national education days, which are kicking off again in September, September 13th at Huddersfield Golf Club, October 11th at Carnoustie, and November 23rd at Walton Heath. So that's open to GCMA members and non-members as well. The idea is to hopefully get some board and committee members involved in those days as well. So so that's really what's coming up for as regards professional development, and of course our accreditation program, which is launching next month. We're very excited about that as well. So it's all good.
Yep, and you can hear about that one on the previous GCMA Insights episode that just went out recently. So thank you very much, guys. Always great to catch up, and thank you for some excellent information again. There's lots to go away and think about, and we'll make as much of this available as possible so people can hopefully utilize it and strengthen what's happening at their clubs. So Karen, Kevin, probably catch up with you in the next couple of months, I would imagine, and Gavin, we'll see you soon. Thanks everyone for listening or tuning in.
Thanks, Leighton.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks everyone.